She looked around the cabin one more time, running her fingers along the polished wood trim of the porthole. Well, cozy enough, though it might stop being so pleasant if things don't go the way she hopes. The cabin was small but thoughtfully designed. A narrow bed with crisp white linens, a compact desk bolted to the wall, a mirror that reflected the soft amber glow of the reading lamp. Through the round porthole, she could see the harbor lights beginning to blur as the massive ship prepared to leave port. This was it. The moment she'd been planning for months. Her escape. Her reinvention. The ship's radio crackled to life with a cheerful voice congratulating passengers on departure. Welcome aboard the Aurora, ladies and gentlemen. We're delighted to have you with us on this 10-day journey across the Mediterranean. After dinner, all passengers are invited to the Grand Salon, where Captain Rodrigo himself will personally introduce you to his distinguished crew. We hope this voyage will be unforgettable. Unforgettable! She smiled at the word. That's exactly what she needed. Something unforgettable to erase the forgettable years behind her. Well then, if she recalled the handsome men she'd already noticed during her first tour of the ship, the dark-eyed officer checking passenger manifests, the silver-haired gentleman with the expensive watch in the corridor, the young crew member who'd helped with her luggage and whose shy smile suggested he noticed her too. The evening promised to be quite interesting. Her friend Marina had laughed when she'd announced this plan 3 months ago, over wine in her cramped apartment. A cruise? Alone? Are you having a midlife crisis? You're only 35. Maybe I am, or maybe I'm just tired of waiting for life to happen to me. When was the last time I did something spontaneous? Something just for myself? Marina had studied her for a long moment. You're really doing this, aren't you? The divorce isn't even final yet. That's exactly why I'm doing it. Because I spent 10 years being someone's wife, someone's idea of who I should be. I need to remember who I am when no one's watching. And here she was, no one watching, no one expecting anything. Complete freedom, floating in the middle of the sea. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back seemed both familiar and strange. Same dark hair, now loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in her usual practical ponytail. Same brown eyes, but brighter somehow, lit with anticipation rather than resignation. The dress she'd chosen, deep blue silk that caught the light, was something the old her would have called impractical. Perfect. Tonight, she decided, she would say yes to everything. Within reason. Well, within her new expanded definition of reason. The magical moment of departure began. She could hear feet running past her door, excited voices calling to each other. Come on, we're pushing off. You can see the whole harbor from the top deck. Everyone was rushing to the deck to watch the departure, to wave at the shrinking shoreline, to take photos of this beginning. But she decided to test fate. No, she wouldn't go to the deck now. Why rely on chance? Why stand in a crowd of strangers, all focused on what they were leaving behind? She wanted to focus on what was ahead, and she wanted to be strategic about it. Let all the men on this ship have equal footing when she finally appeared. When everyone gathered in the hall for the captain's welcome, that's when she'd make her entrance. That's when she'd make her choice. A sensual choice. Listen to herself, meet herself halfway. Really, this whole departure, this separation from land, it was all so she could finally find herself. Or find a new version of herself. The version that took risks, that felt things deeply, that didn't apologize for wanting more. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed and felt the subtle vibration of the engines through the hull. The ship was moving now. The space between her old life and her new one was growing with every nautical mile. So, time to go. An hour later, after a solitary dinner in her cabin, room service, one of the luxuries she'd allowed herself, she freshened her lipstick, slipped on her heels, and made her way toward the Grand Salon. Climbing the elegant curved staircase with its brass railings, she began passing streams of passengers supporting each other, faces pale and slightly green. Of course, the gentle rolling of the ship, barely noticeable to her, was clearly affecting others. The open sea was different from the calm harbor. Like litmus paper, the motion revealed who had their sea legs and who definitely wouldn't make it to the hall tonight, but would remain in their cabins instead, clutching buckets and cursing their vacation choices. Thanking whatever luck had given her a strong stomach, she entered the grand salon with a light smile and confident stride. All the better, like Sparta. Survival of the fittest, natural selection at work. Some candidates would automatically eliminate themselves tonight. That meant she wouldn't have to choose for long. The grand salon took her breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over polished wood and brass fixtures. Large windows showed the dark sea beyond, stars beginning to appear in the deepening twilight. Round tables with white linens were scattered throughout, each with a small vase of fresh flowers. A stage at one end held a small band, piano, bass, drums, and prominently a saxophone player, who was currently making his instrument sing something slow and sultry. The atmosphere was enchanting. The saxophonist played like a god, and wasn't bad-looking himself, she noticed. Dark hair swept back, strong jaw, the kind of focused intensity musicians had when they were lost in their art. She found herself admiring him, drawn in by the way his fingers moved over the keys, the way he closed his eyes during a particularly emotional phrase. She'd always been fascinated by musicians who could command an instrument like it was part of their body, an extension of their soul. The saxophone wailed and whispered under his touch, and she felt it resonate somewhere in her chest. Involuntarily, she remembered her friend Marina raving about her musician lover last year before he'd moved to Barcelona and broken her heart. "You can't imagine what it's like to have a musician as a lover," Marina had said, wine-drunk and dreamy. "He doesn't just have you, he plays you, like you're his favorite instrument, feels every nuance, understands every breath, every sigh, and how he senses falseness. Any pretending, any holding back, he knows immediately. Ordinary men can't compare. They're all brute force and ego. But a musician, it's fantastic luck to have a real professional musician as a lover. No mountain of muscles can match it. You can take my word for it, or better yet, don't take my word. Test it yourself. Test it or not." She thought pensively, cocktail in hand, something pink and tropical the bartender had recommended. But her eyes were already sliding around the hall, surveying those present. Her mood was improving steadily. Good company had gathered on this ship, an interesting mix of ages and types. It definitely wouldn't be boring. Several intent gazes from various corners of the room made it abundantly clear that introductions would happen. A silver-haired gentleman raised his glass slightly in her direction. A younger man with expensive casual wear and calculated stubble smiled invitingly. The saxophonist, she noticed, had opened his eyes and was looking directly at her while he played. Then the captain entered with several officers in crisp white uniforms. The festivities began. Captain Rodrigo was exactly what a cruise ship captain should be. Weathered, confident, with a voice that carried authority and warmth in equal measure. "Today's rolling is nothing," he declared with a grin, gesturing at the absent passengers. "By tomorrow, our sea legs will all be steady. And for those of you who made it here tonight, welcome. You're clearly made of strong stuff." The crew joyfully supported his words with knowing smiles. His speech was continued by the cruise director, an energetic woman who outlined the week's activities, and then everything transitioned into a dance party as the band shifted into something with a swing rhythm. Within minutes, a handsome blonde man appeared at her elbow. "May I have this dance?" Why not, she thought. The first partner led well enough in the dance, his hand firm on her waist, his steps confident. He smiled pleasantly and made small talk about the weather and the ship's amenities. But that was probably all that could be said about him. Perfectly nice. Perfectly forgettable. No spark. No sense that the universe had shifted slightly when they touched. He was replaced by a green-eyed brunette with an athletic build and an eager expression. Within 30 seconds, she learned he was an avid hunter. Within 3 minutes, she'd heard about his trophy room. By 5 minutes, he was describing in excruciating detail the time he'd sat in a blind for 16 hours waiting for a particular elk. Spend the evening hearing about how many times he'd sat in a blind? No thanks. Let some other woman have that joy. The next one tried to make an impression as a comedian, launching into a joke before they'd even completed one turn around the floor. His jokes were ancient, which didn't embarrass him in the slightest. He laughed heartily at his own punchlines while she smiled politely and calculated how soon she could escape. Maybe she really should go out on deck, she thought suddenly. Get some air, reset. There's time. 10 days of time. If nothing happens tonight, it'll happen tomorrow. Or the next day. The point wasn't to force it. The point was to be open to it. She was moving toward the door, away from Joke Man, when the crowd shifted and she saw him. Interesting type. And it wasn't even about his looks, though he was attractive in an unconventional way. Angular face, dark hair with distinguished gray at the temples, probably mid-40s. There were better-looking men in the hall, objectively speaking. So what was it? Clothes? He wore simple dark pants and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Nothing flashy. Hairstyle? Just neat, pushed back from his face. No, not that. Simply the way he carried himself, his gaze. He stood near the windows, leaning slightly against the wall, holding a glass of whiskey and watching the room, with the kind of attention that suggested he saw everything, every interaction, every pretense, every small truth people revealed when they thought no one was watching. It was in his gaze that the magnetism lived, a kind of knowing intelligence, a suggestion that he understood the games people played because he'd played them himself and grown tired of them. A promise of something real beneath all the surface pleasantries. He looked at her intently across the room. She didn't look away. For a long moment, they simply held each other's gaze while the music played and people danced, and the ship rolled gently beneath them. And the music suggested the answering move. He set down his glass and walked toward her with deliberate steps. Not hurried, not hesitant, just certain. May I invite you to dance? His voice was low, slightly rough with an accent she couldn't quite place. Spanish? Italian? You can try, she smiled. That fleeting moment when their fingers touched made everything clear. To be continued. Words became superfluous. Two complete strangers began to move together as if they'd been dancing for years. His hand on her waist felt right, warm and sure. Her hand in his felt safe and dangerous at once. They dissolved into the sounds of music. The musicians had shifted to something slower, more intimate. A torch song about longing and late nights. The music seemed to continue even in the pauses, sounding somewhere inside them. Suddenly, the whole crowd seemed noisy and foreign. Everyone else was just background noise. This room is too loud, he said quietly, his mouth close to her ear so she could hear him over the music. And too full of people pretending to be happier than they are. She laughed, surprised by his directness. And you can tell that by looking at them. Can't you? She glanced around. He was right. Forced laughter. Desperate flirtations. People trying too hard. Let's escape to the deck, he said. The stars are incredible right now. Have you been out since we left port? No, I deliberately missed the departure. Why? I didn't want to watch what I was leaving behind. I wanted to face forward. He smiled, and it transformed his face from handsome to striking. I like that. Come. I'll show you what you missed, except what you'll see is better. The open sea. No land in sight. Just us and the stars and the darkness. They slipped out through a side door onto the promenade deck. The change was immediate and absolute. The noise of the party faded to a distant murmur. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the salt, sweet smell of the ocean. The sky above was a revelation. thousands upon thousands of stars scattered across the black velvet expanse. More stars than she'd ever seen in her city-lit life. "Oh my God," she breathed. "I told you." They walked to the railing. Below, the dark water rushed past, occasionally catching the ship's lights and sparkling. Above, the cosmos put on its eternal show. "I guarantee you a shooting star within 10 seconds, he said. "So think of a wish, but think carefully first, because it will definitely come true." "You believe in that?" "Tonight? Yes, tonight I believe in everything." She closed her eyes and thought. What did she want? What did she really want, underneath all the hurt and disappointment and careful control? "I don't even need to think," she said, opening her eyes. "I've known for a long time what I'll wish for." "How I'd like to know that," he said softly. "Really, though, what do women who are already blessed by fate dream about? Judging by your appearance, your confidence, you seem like someone who has everything." She laughed, but there was an edge to it. "Appearances are misleading. What I wish for is simple. I wish for more moments like this, more shooting stars, more chances to feel something real. So there'll be no need to rush or hold back or settle. That's not a small wish. I'm done with small wishes." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. True to his word, a brilliant streak of light shot across the sky, there and gone in a heartbeat. "There," he said. "Did you make it?" "I did." "You know," he said, turning to face her, "I know stars fairly well, and I want to tell you something. See that bright star there? The blue-white one?" She followed his pointing finger. "It's called Vega. It's one of the brightest stars in the northern sky. The ancient Arabs called it the falling eagle. In Chinese legend, it represents a weaver girl who fell in love with a cowherd, and they were separated by the gods and placed in the sky, only allowed to meet once a year." That's a sad story. It is, but there's another tradition. Some say that Vega is the patroness of lovers who take risks. She promises them unforgettable passion and genuine connection. On one condition, of course. Which is? She was smiling now, charmed despite herself. "You have to make a promise under that star. Not just a wish, a promise to yourself. A commitment to be brave, to not hold back, to let yourself feel everything, even if it scares you." "And if I don't?" "Then passion and real connection will pass you by. You'll be safe, comfortable, lonely." That's quite a threat. It's not a threat, it's an invitation. Really, it's a shame to waste such a moment. You can't imagine how rare this is, being in the right place with an open heart when the stars align. Shall we test it? Shall we make that promise? What a romantic, she thought. Or maybe just a very skilled seducer, did it matter? "I'll make you a deal," she said. "I'll make that promise if you tell me something true about yourself. Something real. Not a story about stars or legends. Something about you." He studied her for a long moment. The ship rolled gently beneath them. Music drifted faintly from the salon. "Fair enough," he said finally. "Something true. I'm on this ship because I walked away from a life that looked perfect on paper. Successful architecture firm, beautiful apartment, a partner who loved the idea of me but not the reality. Everyone thought I was crazy to leave. Maybe I am, but I couldn't breathe anymore in that perfect life. So I bought a ticket on a ship going anywhere, and I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not performing for everyone else." The honesty in his voice was startling. She felt something crack open in her chest. "Your turn," he said. "I'm running away from a marriage that died years ago, but I was too scared to admit it. I spent a decade trying to be the person someone else needed me to be, and I forgot who I was. So I'm here trying to remember." Or maybe become someone new entirely. I haven't decided which. Maybe you don't have to decide. Maybe you just have to be. Is that wisdom or philosophy? It's hope. She looked up at the stars, at Vega burning bright in the darkness. She thought about promises and risks and the terrible, beautiful uncertainty of not knowing what comes next. Okay, she said. I promise. I promise to be brave. To feel everything. To not hold back. Convincing enough? He asked quietly, smiling. I think so. But maybe it needs to be sealed somehow. Don't all promises need to be sealed? You're right, he said, his voice dropping lower. They do. When he kissed her, it wasn't tentative or questioning. It was sure. Deep. A kiss that tasted like whiskey and salt air and possibility. His hands cupped her face gently and she let herself fall into it. The sensation, the moment, the perfect present tense of it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder, the world felt different. Sharper, more vivid. Definitely sealed, she managed. He laughed and the sound was warm and real. I'm Gabriel, by the way. Since we're making promises to each other, you should probably know my name. Elena. Elena, beautiful name for a brave woman. They stood together at the railing, not quite touching, but close enough to feel each other's warmth, and watched the stars wheel slowly overhead. Behind them, the party continued. Ahead of them, 10 days of open sea stretched into the unknown. So what happens now? She asked. Now? We see where the current takes us. No expectations, no plans. Just possibility. I can work with possibility. Good, because I think that's all any of us really have. The ship sailed on through the darkness, carrying them both away from everything they'd known and toward everything they might become. And overhead, Vega burned bright, keeping watch over two people who'd been brave enough to make a promise to themselves under a sky full of stars.